Okay, I'll get my gavel up, make it official. And good evening, I guess, at this point, although it's still light out. I'm going to go ahead and call this session of the City of Tumwater Hearing Examiner to order. For the record, today's June 28, 2023, just after 7 p.m. We have one item on the agenda this evening, and this is numbers TUM 221731 and TUM 221732. And these involve a request for approval of a preliminary binding site plan to allow for a 7-lot commercial development with associated open space, parking, landscaping, and infrastructure, and then an associated variance request related to the proposal from zoning setback requirements along a portion of Little Rock Road that would be adjacent to the development. My name is Andrew Reeves. I'm a hearing examiner that the city has selected to hold certain land use application hearings like these. And tonight it will be my role to collect evidence in the form of exhibits and testimony to determine whether this proposal is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, zoning ordinances, critical areas ordinances, and then the specific requirements for approval of a binding site plan under the municipal code. And then because it does involve sort of land division, ensure it complies with our state subdivision act. And then in addition, the specific requirements for approval of a variance under the municipal code. To that end, I received several exhibits in advance of the hearing that I had an opportunity to review. I think ultimately the number at this point is 27, but we'll talk about it and just to be sure. Quite a few exhibits, but this ultimately does include a staff report, thorough one prepared by city staff, the plans themselves, and quite a bit of information and technical reports related to these plans. And these include information on geotechnical aspects such as soil reports related to the proposal, information on how stormwater would be addressed with the development, a traffic impact analysis or TIA, information on our favorite creature in the city of Tumwater, the Mazama pocket gopher, Forester's report, sort of preliminary landscape plans, information on the ownership of the property, including a title report, and other information, technical information of a similar nature. Also received information on the mitigated determination of non-significance, or MDNS, that was issued by the city of Tumwater. There were a few comments that were ultimately received by reviewing government departments and agencies. I think the number ended up being 3, but we can talk about that. I don't believe we received any public comments from the public at large. As far as I'm aware, I don't believe I read any, but I'm sure staff can verify that. And then ultimately information about the notice that was provided in relation to the application, as well as today's hearing. And then a couple exhibits that came in later. And one had to do with, I believe, thoughts on how to amend potential recommended conditions, and then the other had to do with an indemnity agreement related to the work in the Bonneville Power Administration, or BPA easement. And again, we can talk more about that, but my plan is let's go ahead and admit those 27 exhibits into the record. Should anyone, excuse me, should anyone have additional exhibits they would like admitted into the record, let me know, and it's your opportunity to testify, and I'll go ahead and address admitting additional exhibits at that time. All testimony this evening will be under oath or affirmation. That's because were my decision to be appealed under our state's Land Use Petition Act, or LUPA, the recording of tonight's hearing, as well as the admitted exhibits, would serve as the foundation for any such appeal. And let's see. I think finally the order that we typically follow, and I believe we're going to follow this evening, is first we'll hear from the planning department staff, who will give sort of an overview of the proposal and the review process that led us to tonight's hearing. After that, we'll turn to the applicant team, and that will be their opportunity to present any additional information they feel that myself or members of the public should be aware of in advance of my decision being produced. And then we'll see if there are any members of the public interested in testifying, and if so, they will have that opportunity. And then if necessary at the end, we'll turn back to staff and the applicant to respond to any such testimony. So that's the order that we're going to follow. I thank everyone for being here, and I believe I do see Jeff Myers, city attorney. I assume I'm
You
hearing from
do.
Alex first, Jeff, but is there a particular, you're here for a particular?
I am here in case there are questions that come up regarding the BPA easement and the indemnity agreement.
Exhibit 27. Okay, just wanted to make sure that I didn't totally misunderstand what we were doing tonight. I didn't think there had been a SEPA appeal. I didn't think you were here as a heavy hitter. I didn't think you just were, sad you haven't seen my face in a month. Okay, so we'll just plan on calling on you if necessary, but if not necessary, this is just a lovely way to spend Wednesday evening. So we won't go to Jeff Myers just yet. We'll go to Alex Baruch and I'll get him sworn in. So Alex Baruch, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
Thank you. And if you could just state and spell your name for the recording and explain who you are and your role here at the city.
Yes, my name is Alex Baruch, Alex Baruch, and I'm a planner with the city of Tumwater.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. And did my sort of rundown of the exhibits track with what you were hoping I would review? And was I right that the last email I got with 2 exhibits was the last set of exhibits or intended exhibits? Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. We have 26, which was the land use map, and then 27, which is the indemnity agreement.
Okay, and if I misstated what 26 was, I apologize. I haven't. I just was. You know what? Now I'm seeing. I'm looking closely. Okay, 26 was the map. 27 was the indemnity, and then in addition to that, staff was hoping to amend a condition. So that is not part of Exhibit 26. I may have messed that up. Am I now unmessing it up? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it is clear now.
Excellent. Okay, so at some point, maybe whatever feels right to you, we could talk about the hope on condition 52 and the potential amendment to it. But for the moment, why don't I let you take the stage and go ahead if you have a presentation or whatever you wanted to run through in terms of discussing this proposal.
Absolutely. Yeah, I will just run through the some remarks outlining the staff report and presentation, and just discuss the project for a moment. Before you this evening, as you mentioned, is a preliminary binding site plan to subdivide 2 parcels totaling approximately 9 acres into a new 7-lot commercial development with associated infrastructure, parking, open space, along with a request for variance from required setbacks along a portion of Little Rock Road. The property is located at 1401 and 1551 Kingswood Drive Southwest and is in the general commercial zone district. Currently, the project is vacant with the exception of BPA stanchions on the western portion of the property and existing vegetation, including trees. The topography of the property is mostly flat. Surrounding properties are zoned general commercial to the north and east, mixed use to the south, and both general commercial and single family low density to the west. The Aquifer Protection Overlay District also applies to this property. The overlay district restricts hazardous uses to protect aquifer recharge areas. The proposed commercial uses include 3 fast food restaurants, an oil change service station, 1 seated restaurant, retail and office space, a hotel, and an electric vehicle charging station, which are not restricted land uses in the Aquifer Protection Overlay. Proposed improvements are shown on the preliminary site development grading plan and include connections to the surrounding road network, grading, infrastructure, and open space. All new utilities on site will be underground pursuant to the Tumwater Municipal Code. In addition to the preliminary binding site plan, as I mentioned before, a variance has been requested to reduce the required 20-foot setback from a residential zone property to 0. The request is for a portion of the property along Little Rock Road that abuts lots 3, 4, and 5. The single-family low-density zone property is currently used by the Tumwater School District as a middle school and is designated as a public institutional use on the future land use map. Staff has reviewed the variance criteria listed in 1858-040 and has found that there are unique circumstances that should allow for the reduction in setback requirements. Some of these conditions include Little Rock Road, a boulevard-style street that includes trees down the middle of the road, allowing for a visual separation, and a minimum 60-foot right-of-way separating the properties. Additionally, the intent of the code is met through the right-of-way separation, which meets the 20-foot minimum. Moving into the regulatory framework, the preliminary binding site plan application was submitted and subsequently a notice of application was issued on December 15th, 2022. During the notice of application comment period, the Nisqually Indian Tribe and Squaxin Island Tribe commented on the project, requesting a cultural resource study be completed prior to issuance of any grading work on the property. Condition 2 was included in response to their request. Concurrently, the project was reviewed by the City of Tumwater Transportation Manager, who provided a transportation concurrency ruling, which stated that traffic generated from the project will cause the level of service at Kingswood Drive and Tyee Drive to fall below the city's level of service standard, and required mitigations through the construction of a compact roundabout at that intersection prior to issuance of the first certificate of occupancy. Additionally, trips are proposed to be sent through the Tumwater Boulevard I-5 interchange, which will also require payment of mitigation fees or construction of the required interchange improvements and construction of a temporary signal. The city reviewed a SEPA environmental checklist and other information submitted by the applicant. Mitigated determination of non-significance was issued on May 19th, 2023, and no appeals of the SEPA threshold determination were filed. During the SEPA comment period, Washington State Department of Ecology commented on the application with some specific comments related to elements of construction activities, but there were no immediate concerns brought up about the land use application itself. Lastly, a public hearing notice was sent out on June 16th, and notices for all three processes were mailed to property owners within 300 feet of the subject property and various agencies, posted on site and published in the Olympian. With this information, staff finds that the preliminary binding site plan variance request as conditioned conform to the comprehensive plan, Tumwater Municipal Code, planning standards, development standards, and policies of the City of Tumwater. Staff finds that adequate provisions have been made for public health, safety, and general welfare, and that public use and interest will be served by the proposal. Staff recommends approval of the preliminary binding site plan and variance applications with the attached conditions, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Brute. Okay, so I guess, well, why don't we just, I'll pick something. Why don't we start with traffic? So I think that my understanding, at least, is that there's already a bit of a traffic situation, meaning that my understanding is at least one or more nearby intersections is already operating at level of service or LOSF. And there has been analysis showing that this project, will add additional trips, but then the applicant is performing work that as mitigation, and this is addressed both through recommended conditions of approval, but also as requirements under the SEPA determination to address this problem. But I guess what I'm saying is the problem has already been acknowledged and is already being worked on in a meta level through the 6-year TIP or transportation improvement plan, et cetera. And if we go with the concept of, growth pays for growth kind of a thing, this is the type of project that is, the hope is that the improvements that'll be done are the types of improvements, the big one probably being that roundabout, that will hopefully solve or alleviate some of these problems. But am I grasping the situation? And if not, can you clarify or flesh it out for me a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So the I-5 Tumwater Boulevard intersection is more in line with what you referenced as far as paying for your impact to that intersection through the payment of the mitigation fees. For the roundabout, this project was the one that tipped it over. So okay. The requirement for the roundabout is a part of the development application, and therefore it's not a payment of the funds. It's going to be actually constructing the roundabout as a part of the project.
Got it. Okay, so the roundabout itself, which is, I believe, well, I was going to say northwest, but it's almost north, just based on the way the property is situated, is technically not frontage. I mean, this is off-site in some respects, but the determination was that the number of trips that are expected to result from this proposal moving forward, were to be approved, would sort of, as you said, the tipping point, and so the thought is that roundabout will, but through construction of that roundabout, that will sort of fix that immediate problem, as it were. And I, having dealt with so many of these things, I assume just by having a roundabout versus a lighted intersection or something, that right away probably immediately makes a huge difference once people learn how to use them. But then the bigger, in other parts of the city, there's also mitigation fees that are statutorily imposed in this case. And this applicant will pay those fees, and those fees are going toward that issue you mentioned at I-5 and Tumwater Boulevard. So they're not going to go and do offsite improvements to that, but the money that is being paid is going into the kitty, as it were. And I know there are long-term plans and ideas on how to address that, and it's a multi-jurisdictional issue with WashDOT and all kinds of other agencies. But so now I get it. There are two sort of separate things going on, and this project through construction of the roundabout is sort of dealing with the immediate local issue, and then the bigger picture issue is being dealt with more traditionally through just transportation impact fees. Am I getting all that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Excellent. Okay, so that was making sure I understood all that. And then in terms of, well, why don't we talk exhibits for a minute? And I just want to make sure that this wasn't just me, or something weird when I downloaded things. I did notice that in the exhibit, I think it was our geotech, let's see, 2A, hold on, apologize. There were about 40 pages of nothing, just blank. And in the PDF, I have it as PDF about 234 is the end.
I think it might be exhibit 17 potentially. That's the geotech and stormwater evaluation. Is that what you're referencing?
Twice. The first time I have it earlier as 2A, which, well, this would have been a part of. I thought it was the soils report, or the attached soils report. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about? And if so, any explanation on kind of what may have happened there? If you look at the PDF that was downloadable, for me, it shows up around page 200 of the PDF, and it does have a label of item 2A, and then there's 40, 50 pages with nothing. They're fully blank.
And you said 200 and what exactly?
Right around page 2. Let's see. For me, the blank starts around 205. 205 is identified as attachment A, exploration logs, and then I don't have any information for at least 30 something pages. And maybe it's something on my end. I just wanted to see if anyone else had that issue.
I did download the packet, and all of those pages show up in my download, but we can make sure that you have that information.
It could be a user problem on my end. And to be clear, I am not a soil scientist. So I'm not even sure if any of this would be helpful for me, but I wanted to make sure that there wasn't a global problem. It might just be on my end. My internet was slow the minute I tried to download, and that info didn't superimpose. I just wanted to make sure that, that information isn't non-existent, or there wasn't a major issue nobody noticed. So it might be user error on my end, which I will admit does happen sometimes. So that will not be an issue or impact this situation. I'll sort that out as a procedural matter in the next day or so with staff. But so it wasn't, you all didn't do anything wrong. It's on me. I apologize. I will try to sort that out. Okay, with that, in terms of the exhibits, those final two, exhibits, if you wanted to just touch on those, and if, you know, those were 26 and 27, and we now know Jeff Myers, city attorney, is here just in case, but can you walk us through what those two sort of late exhibits were, and what those are about?
Absolutely. So 26 is pretty straightforward, just a part of the comprehensive plan future land use map, showing what the school property across the street is designated for future use, and that is public institutional. So it kind of furthers the explanation that, you know, single family medium may be what it is, or single family low may be what it is now, but the future intention is that it remains a school property.
Meaning that had that change already occurred, had the council already changed the comp plan and the zoning, the variance that is being requested in this case would not be necessary. Is
Correct.
that a pretty good summary?
That's correct.
Okay, because the intent of the provision is that, you know, when you do have commercial property next to residential versus residential, or residential something else, you know, but if it were actual residential and actual commercial, you're going to force the commercial property to have a certain level of, you know, buffering and space to not impact the residential. But here, you know, not actually what exists on the ground. And furthermore, the council already has plans moving forward to make a change such that timing wise, we need the variance, as it were, for this project to move forward, you know, sooner rather than later. But, you know, if the timing were different, they wouldn't actually need this variance. That kind of sums it up.
That's correct.
Excellent. Okay. And then 27, a little more complicated, if you want to talk to that, or I'm happy to hear from Jeff Myers, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, I can do a brief overview and Jeff can jump in with any details.
Okay.
Originally, staff had proposed that a BPA land use agreement be entered into between the applicant or the property owner and BPA to move forward with site development grading on this project. With, you know, very various city questions about the use of the property underneath the BPA easement, and making sure that the city had the assurances that the city infrastructure could be used into the future. So the indemnity agreement was thought up as an alternative to that opportunity to indemnify the city and hold, you know, the property owners accountable moving forward, you know, to take care of the infrastructure, any other issues underneath those power lines into the future as a part of the development.
Sure. And are you able to share your screen, Alex Baruch?
Absolutely. Yep.
If you pull up the site plan, that for those watching or may in the future may watch, but some folks in Washington may not realize that how much of our power comes from a, you know, hydro electric giant project, a dam project, and then the Bonneville Power Association has these giant power lines, and there is a giant BPA easement that runs through I don't know how many jurisdictions. But can you point out on the grid kind of where that BPA easement would be, as it were?
Yeah, so the stanchions I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation are on both sides of this right in, right out road entering the site. And then the lines are right here and right here as well.
Okay.
And it's measured with the BPA easement line right here, just showing the width of that line.
Okay, so in this case, it's not so much. So those stanchions, essentially, I'm assuming, right? Those are big tower sort of, you know, and those really high power electric lines are way, you know, pretty high up. I don't know how many feet, but you know, these are not the power lines normally we think of. These are, you know, big ones, and usually are much higher up. So essentially, the thing that is on the property are those two stanchions, and then way up high, running sort of from the, looks like in this case, a little southeast northwesterly direction, would be power lines far overhead. And so essentially, the city has an agreement that covers far more properties than this, but through the city of Tumwater, BPA and Tumwater sort of are in a situation that, whereby BPA can go do work they need to do related to that.
If I might
Yeah,
explain.
Jeff, and I'm messing this up, Attorney
Yeah,
Jeff Myers.
BPA has easement agreements
Yep.
with all of the underlying property owners.
I know, Jeff, sorry, can you stop 1 sec? I'm
Sure.
not swearing you in, but I am gonna have you say who you are and spell your name for the audio.
Very good. My name is Jeff Myers, Myers. I'm an attorney here in Olympia representing the city of Tumwater.
Thank you. And I, as I was talking, I know I was messing it up in my head, but please.
No problem.
Flesh it out if you could.
BPA has easement agreements for these electronic transmission lines, and you have it exactly right. They are very high up and they are supported by the towers, including the two that Mr. Baruch described on this premises. And their easement rights basically allow them to maintain those electrical transmission lines free from interference by the underlying property owner or anyone else who might be acquiring rights in this property. So they have these easement rights that potentially allow them to remove things that might interfere with their electric transmission lines. And being the federal government, our standard approach to this has always been to say, let's get an agreement between the property owner who wants to develop and the BPA so that it's clear that they can proceed with the development. Well, the federal government is a little hard to come to an arrangement with. And our review of the site plan did not show anything that creates that kind of interference. Now we wanted to make sure that nothing in the future is going to be subject to being removed that's necessary infrastructure. And that in the event that something does come up in the future that requires removal of structures, that would be done at the expense of the property owner. And if there is any liability associated with using this easement, that not fall upon the city.
Okay.
That is where the indemnity agreement comes in. That is Exhibit 27.
And okay, so to be clear, the reference to federal government, you essentially mean BPA, the
BPA.
Bonneville Power Association. That's the reference.
That's the federal
governmental agency. And this property is not owned by the city. This property is owned, by a private group. And I know we have the owner, I believe, property owner, or their sort of representative here, and Kingwood LLC, Trevor Colby, the managing member, who has joined us. So there's already an easement that Mr. Colby's, as the property owner, there's an easement in place between him, his group, and BPA. But what the city wanted from an indemnity agreement essentially is saying, yes, were this to go forward, we, the city of Tumwater, did approve this binding site plan to happen, which will then lead to development. But ultimately, the property owner and BPA, if there were fights related to this down the road, city of Tumwater is not involved. I mean, that's the basic concept.
That's a shorthand way of saying that any liability that might arise from BPA's easement rights would be resolved by the property owner and their successors. And
Right.
So the indemnity agreement that we have agreed upon and executed would run with the land, and it would be there so that the property owner now and into the future would stand behind it.
There you go. So again, the idea being the city would not be involved. So
Correct.
essentially the city, it's good the city has thought of this, for one. I can envision a horrible situation in some other jurisdiction where something could happen and nobody really actually thought of this problem, causing problems for the jurisdiction, but here essentially it's saying, not like, yes, there's thorough review of the proposal. The city is doing a thorough review of what's happening. But the idea being, were I to issue a decision approving the binding site plan, development will occur, the situation in terms of the easement isn't changing. It's just that because the use of the land has changed and the city agreed to allow a permit to move forward, the city just wants to ensure if for whatever reason there was an issue between, again, the government, as you said, federal government, BPA, that agency, and then the property owner currently or down the road, it wouldn't be an issue related to the city of Tumwater.
That's correct.
Okay, and Tyler Bradley, I will get to you very shortly, I promise, and we'll come right back to this. So thank you, Attorney Myers, and I have admitted that as Exhibit 27. It has already been signed, notified, so it's in the record, and I think with the clarification you helped provide, I think I understand the situation. So I think unless you had anything else you wanted to share, it's pretty nice out. You might be able to leave and go enjoy the weather, because I can't fathom having other questions for this project.
And I think Mr. Brook can answer any of them.
Okay, but thank you very much for helping explain.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I'll go back to you real quick, Alex Brook. I think he explained it well. And I may have other questions for you shortly, but in terms of the additional exhibits is where we were at. Did that track and did that all make sense?
Absolutely.
Excellent. And then the procedural communication provided to my office did have amending language for one of the conditions that has been proposed in the staff report. Yes,
that's correct.
And that would have been, I think, well, it'd be adding a whole new, wait, no, it's amending the final condition is what it is. And the thought being wholesale change out what was in the staff report with some slightly altered language. Is that right?
Really, it's just adding the last sentence to the existing language. And I think I highlighted it in the email to you, but I could read it out if you'd like.
Yeah, well, I was going to say either we can make this email its own exhibit so that the record is real clear. I kind of prefer to do that if you're okay with that. And then I'll have you read the sentence so everyone knows. But if you could read the sentence, but if you're okay with it, why don't we make this procedural email exhibit 28? Does that work?
Yep, that works for us.
Go right ahead.
Great. So the addition would be, alternatively, an indemnity agreement shall be agreed upon and approved by the city to be recorded by the applicant against the subject property prior to site development grading issuance.
Sure, but that's the agreement that is included already. It's done, right?
That is correct. It has not been recorded yet, but the agreement is in place and has been notarized by everybody. The first portion is just the option for them to go through the land use approval process with BPA. If for some reason they no longer wanted to, record the indemnity agreement and would prefer to go through that process, we wanted to make sure that both opportunities were available.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That helps clarify it well. So why don't we make that 28 as we talked about? And I think I may come back and have a few more technical questions for you, but based on where we're at, I think Terrell Bradley has some thoughts. And we can start with this and then other aspects at that point. Does that work for you? Excellent.
Absolutely.
Okay. And Mr. Bradley, I'll get you sworn in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth in testimony you give here today?
I do.
And I apologize. Can you state your name and then spell it for us?
Tyrell Bradley, Tyrell Bradley.
So I messed it up twice. Okay. Thank you for being here. And if you can explain who you are and what your role is with this proposal.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the client's civil engineer, essentially the project manager.
Sure, and you're with LDC, is that right?
Correct.
And that's an acronym. Well, do you guys even use a full? Is it limited development? I don't even remember.
No, it's actually land development consultants. So it actually makes sense. It's not three people's names.
It's okay, but I think of it as LDC. I don't think anyone else really says otherwise. So LDC, you're with LDC, and you're sort of the applicant's rep
Yep.
in non-legal capacity. You're an engineer.
Yeah.
And why don't you go ahead and start with clarification you clearly or thoughts you had about Exhibit 27, the indemnity agreement that we were
Yeah,
talking about.
I can start with that. I have thoughts or additions on two of the conversation or the topics you guys were discussing. So the indemnity agreement, just to give you a little bit more depth on the owner's side, is BPA. I think it was in the 30s. Initially came through here with a bunch of infrastructure, recorded easements against the land. Those easements were pretty, I will say the wording was pretty soft. It was essentially, we can cut trees and don't build structures within our easement. And then in that kind of stayed true through the 50s. And then sometime in the 70s, BPA came through on all their properties and had new easements recorded that said, you have to come through our land use approval process in order to construct anything underneath our power lines. The property owner who owned this property at the time essentially said, no, thank you. I'm not signing a new agreement. I'm going to hold myself to the old one. So the reason that this project is unique is that properties on either side of this have updated their easements to have to go through a land use approval process with BPA, which would essentially indemnify the city because BPA is approving the infrastructure underneath their lines. This project is unique in the sense that we don't have to ask BPA for approval, which puts the city in a risky position should they come in and say, we want to move our power poles. Now the city doesn't have a stamp of approval. So that's the reason for the indemnity agreement.
Okay, and so we talked about, I know it's not perfectly east-west, it's sort of, the power lines run up way up high in the air. I don't know how many feet, they're higher
About
than
75 feet.
There you go. Normal power lines are closer to, I don't know, 18 feet, 25 feet or something.
Correct.
But the property owner on, I guess, to the southeast and northwest, adjacent property owners and many property owners sort of in the 70s had a new deal, as it were, weirdly related to this New Deal project with the BPA from the 30s, right? Bad pun, but true. This particular property owner didn't do that. So this is fascinating. Thank you for explaining that. And I get that level of detail probably wasn't necessary for me to understand, but I really appreciate it. It really does make a lot of sense. So thank you for the context. But essentially, I know the property owner has signed off on what has been proposed because I've seen it now, and the mayor signed off. But what Mr. Baruch was saying was, in fact, this is actually not yet been recorded and may not be recorded instantaneously because there is a second option. And the second option is, essentially you and BPA, you being the property owner, kind of updating the agreement so that you're under the 70s era. It's probably even more onerous now, but the kind of thing that you could go through an approval process with the federal government agency, BPA. So you'll have two paths forward is what it is. Is that right?
Correct. And the current property owner does own other properties within BPA easements and has had to go through the land use approval process, as well as myself. Nothing that we're proposing is out of what BPA has approved previously. So should we choose to go that route, we're confident as a development team that it's a viable site.
Sure, but this will give you a little bit of flexibility until you decide ultimately to break ground and decide to break ground. You'll do one or the other before you break ground, and I'm confident LDC and the property owner know that as commercial, involved tenants. But is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Excellent. Okay. And then on the same topic, before we move on, the email that I received, I'm sure had been discussed with you. I know you didn't received this email, and I'm happy to have Alex Baruch send you what was sent to my office so you can sign off on the exact language just to ensure, but I'm going to make it an exhibit so that it will clearly be part of the record. So we'll just convert it to a PDF and we'll stamp it as 28. But before it officially is part of the record, we'll make sure that, LDC and the applicant agrees there's no issue. But the only change between what was recommended was what our planner read into the record. But do you agree that that makes sense? And, were I to approve this, that change to condition 52 seems appropriate?
I agree.
Okay, great. All right, if Jeff Myers didn't leave yet, I think now we're done with the easement as far as I'm aware. I'm not trying to kick him off the call. I'm just giving him a break if he's got better things to do.
It's fascinating to hear some of the details from the New Deal.
Right, it was a bad book, but it was I know my history pretty good. I was actually ancient philosophy was what I wasted my time getting a degree in college. But
with that, I'll check out unless Alex gives me a call on my cell phone and I have to jump back on.
That's great. Okay, with that, why don't we move on to next steps? And so, Mr. Bradley, I assume you're also sort of shepherding things through. I know you have others on your team available, including the property owner. But what I was going to say is this is your opportunity to provide any additional detail, clarification, etc.
Yeah, so I have no comments on the variance or all of the application materials that Alex went through already. The only item that I would like to provide further clarification on, just because I feel like maybe you were starting to toy with the threading a little bit, is the roundabout at Kingswood and Tyee. So when we initially proposed this project, our traffic engineer found out that intersection was level of service F, and we proposed doing some restriping to provide a essentially left turn pocket for when you leave on the Tyee, you could sit there until you could get into an open spot in traffic.
One second, Mr. Bradley, just for the historic purposes, the record, Alex Baruch, do we have, the site plan isn't actually going to be the most helpful, but do we have an aerial from one of the exhibits we could pop up as we're talking about this? I think that might be really helpful. I think exhibit 10 maybe even, or I'm just quickly.
Yeah, let me pull something up and I'll share my screen as soon as I have it available.
Yeah, I think that'll ultimately, and you know what, folks, if you give me 1 sec, I desperately need to blow my nose. I'm recovering from my third bout of COVID. I'll be right back. I apologize.
Get a glass of water though.
Carol, is this an okay one just to represent the intersection?
Yeah, no, that should work.
Okay.
Oh, you heard that. Sorry, I thought I had muted. I had only turned my video off. Hopefully that wasn't too loud in my grabbing a connect. But okay, I think this, there you go. I don't think we even stopped recording. So thank you, folks. There, now we have a visual representation of what things look like now. And with that, Mr. Bradley, please continue.
Yeah, so we had proposed some striping as you would turn onto Tyee Drive heading north. Yeah, there you go, perfect. We were proposing a modification so a vehicle could sit there in the refuge and wait for an open spot on the northbound movement. The city ultimately came back, the public works director came back and said, hey, we really would prefer a little bit more of a robust option. So the first option was to go to a stop controlled intersection. That's not allowed on Tyee Drive because it's a non-stop controlled roadway. So a stoplight's out. So that left us with a compact roundabout. This intersection is not identified on the transportation improvement plan because this road's actually 20 years old. And so Brandon Hicks and myself, Brandon being the public works director, we went back and forth on, given this road is only 20 years old and it was designed for commercial uses, why didn't they design this for the traffic that they knew would be coming to this? So the city is going to work with the applicant on using some of the transportation impact fees at building permit to go to the offsetting of the cost of building this compact roundabout. Now, it's not included in any of the packet materials, but I had pushed back during these discussions saying, you know, this failed intersection is not just us, it's multiple commercial entities. And, you know, if there's no fees that can be contributed to this, it's an expensive thing to build, you know, off-site, not far away from our site, but far enough away that it's, you know, clearly off-site from our project site.
And sorry, real quick, just for the visual, can you point where your property is relative to the rest of this?
It's about 1,000 feet. There you go. Perfect. About 1,000 feet to the west.
Oh, so, okay, so when we talk about, okay, that helps so much in my head, and I you know, maybe I was reading too quick in my review, so this isn't actually adjacent, this is because there is a roundabout being built there, right?
It's constructed. Yep.
I know it already exists, okay. This is a new roundabout offsite. Okay, thank you. I'm very glad that you're clarifying, because I think if during my more thorough review, writing my decision, it hopefully would make sense, but this is very helpful. So please.
Yes. Yeah, and I apologize for not showing this sooner, but essentially the applicant, we had felt like maybe there was some double dipping going on by paying a TIF and building this offsite infrastructure. So the city's been great, and they're like, yes, we are going to work with you on offsetting some of that cost with the TIF fund. So I just wanted you to have that information as you're reviewing this.
Well, that's very helpful. I want to make sure, and you have reviewed the conditions probably and more closely than I have at this point, but I want to make sure that we're confident that neither, well, I can't change the MDNS, you know, in my mind, that's kind of an ongoing, there's been some minor legal changes recently in the last year about that, but I don't consider it generally something the hearing examiner can do. But in terms of the conditions proposed here, I just want to make sure the language, there isn't any language that could cause a problem, to the extent that what it sounds like is the concept is that potentially, because you all have agreed to do this, right, the city is discretionarily is working with you to reduce the potential offsite, you know, the transportation impact fees that are being paid. And maybe Alex already thought of this. All right, so let's just check here. This is the MDNS that we're looking at, yeah? Mr.
That
Baruch.
is correct. Yeah.
Okay, that was Mr. Baruch. Okay. Converting, yeah. Right. And so what, unless I'm not seeing it, what Mr. Bradley's talking about is that it sounds that he's been talking to folks in the city, and there's an opportunity, or there's a thought that there could be some wiggle room on what the mitigation fee ends up being based on the cost of constructing the intersection, the roundabout that we're talking about. Ms. Baruch,
Yes.
I'll start with you. Are you agreeing that that's what's going on?
Yes, Brendan Hicks does, the transportation engineering director, has the ability to use funds collected by transportation impact fees across the city for transportation improvements, and, you know, offsetting is something that's within his ability, you know, even after the MDNS is issued, you know, to work with the applicant to address, you know, their concerns.
But just to be clear, these mitigation measures that we see on screen right now, 1A is not the roundabout that they are building. The 1A is the LOS F I-5 on off ramp that comes up in more than one project, but mitigation fees have been identified, and they go to pay for partially for that. And then In fact, so that's all one is dealing with that issue. Two is the second, the Tyee Drive issue, where they are installing a roundabout. I guess what's missing, and it isn't in the mitigation measures or acknowledged, is the idea that because others, I guess what Mr. Bradley was trying to point out is that, you know, they themselves, by building this project, would be unfairly having to construct that roundabout at Kingswood and Tyee 100% on their dime because other development contributed and there's not any kind of agreement, latecomer fee, anything in place, and none of the previous property owners paid, you know, fees based on any of that. So I think what he was trying to say was that some of the mitigation fee, that 4219 fee related to mitigation one, might be reduced. That's what he's been working with the direct. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah,
Like, can
let
you
me-
clarify if I'm wrong? Miss Bradley is making a face. I want to make sure I'm not screwing this up.
Yeah, let me pause. So the 4219 is specifically for this I-5 Tumwater
Right.
Boulevard roundabout. It cannot be used for really anything else other than that project specifically. Separate from that fee, there are transportation impact fees that are collected based on the use of the project for new construction. And that is not a part of the mitigation package because it's a default on every building permit, new commercial building permit that comes in, even change of use to pay, you know, the change in that, you know, potential transportation impact that's occurring with that new use or new development coming in. So that is not a part of the MDNS. That is a separate fee that's required at the time of building permit. And that is what I think we were referencing as far as a portion of that fee being contributed to the item 2 mitigation measure for the Kingswood Tyee roundabout, compact roundabout.
Sure. Why don't we give Ms. Bradley a moment to try to also untangle, and with our powers combined, hopefully I'll fully understand, because I can't really do anything in relation to MDNS. It's done. You know, it's not a non-appealed final MDNS. So I think more helpful would be if we can pull up the actual proposed conditions for this. That is an area whereby I can make sure we've captured whatever the thought Mr. Bradley was trying to clarify, which I will now let Mr. Bradley try to clarify. So,
Yeah, actually, if you go to page 347, Alex, it should clear this up pretty easily. So,
and this is the TIA that was prepared.
correct. So
Okay.
you can see each lot. So we've got the lots listed there. The SEPA mitigation fee is the fee for the I-5 interchange. So that's what each lot has to pay to the I-5 interchange. And then if you go over all the way to the far right, or yeah, sorry, you're correct, Alex. The TIF fee is right there per lot. So that's the monies that the city will have access to offset for the construction of the roundabout that we are constructing.
I guess I grasped that. Ms. Bradley, I was getting the sense that you were making the point that independent of what's happening over on the Tumwater Boulevard I-5 issue, you all have agreed to install the roundabout at Tyee, but you kind of overpaying in your mind, you know, and I think convinced the city that that's kind of true. And so what I was trying to make sure is that there's nothing in the conditions, or if there's nothing, put something in the conditions that captures the concept that the city and you all are able to agree. If you can't reduce what's happening in terms of SEPA fees, because that's its own, thing, maybe there's another way to capture or reduce other fees. I just want to make sure, I'm not trying to overcomplicate here. I'm trying to make sure that whatever agreement you've been working on with Public Works or, is
You're absolutely
make
correct.
sure I'm not caught, like, because things get frozen, right? In what,
Correct.
with the decision, and I'm not involved in SEPA at this point. So I want to make sure any conditions are written in a way that either don't cause problems, or if it's silent, actually we add something that at least at a minimum says, the city has the discretion to reduce fees of whatever kind, to account for whatever. That's what I'm trying to accomplish. Is that making sense?
You're absolutely, that's what I was trying to get to as well. So I appreciate
Okay.
you going on this journey with me.
All of
So
us together.
you are correct. I'm not currently aware of a condition that essentially says something as simple as the city has, the right to, reduce TIF, traffic impact fees at their discretion, like something like that. I would prefer to have added, just because right now it's only been a conversation between myself and the city, and I don't want that conversation to all of a sudden disappear. Not saying that it will. City of Tumwater has been outstanding to work with this entire time, but it's good for everybody to have that listed.
Yeah.
So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Alex, but maybe we can put our heads together with Brandon sometime this week. And
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be complicated, and I think I overcomplicated it because I didn't mean to bring SEPA in. And this
No,
is
you're fine.
independent of any SEPA mitigation fees, and these are two different problems. And I just want to, and maybe you can stop sharing at this point, Alex. But are you tracking with what I was trying to say? I think Miss Bradley is, but Alex, on behalf of the city, are we on the same page?
Yeah, I understand the concept, and I don't think that there is any hesitance that we would like to help contribute, as Brandon Hicks has mentioned to Tyrell in the past. We can definitely work with Brandon as far as what type of a condition could be added to the staff report through the remainder of this week if we end up deciding that one is if a condition is necessary to add. We can definitely send that over to you.
Yeah, well, why don't we plan on that, and not to the staff report, but to, a proposed
The condition.
We'll make it an exhibit. We'll call it 29. But the goal is it gets added to my decision, because as thorough as your staff report is, ultimately the legally binding thing that is being produced will be my decision. And even if it's as simple as, a condition to the effect that essentially says, the applicant and the city have been in discussion related to the roundabout at Tyee, and offsetting impact fees. The hearing examiner acknowledges that there may be a reduction or something, but I'm not going to impose anything one way or the other. I just want it, it'll kind of capture the thought, and B, it'll ensure that the city has the discretion to do that, so that we wouldn't end up having a weird thing where we'd have to come back to alter my decision for this one minor, it's not minor. I recognize the amounts of money can be big, but the point being, we want to ensure that this has been captured and there aren't any problems one way or the other. So if that works for everybody, I just think that'd be the least impactful, smartest way to ensure we don't cause problems for the city or the applicant moving forward, and that this is captured and can be addressed. Does that make sense, Alex Brew?
Yep. Yes, Des.
And Miss Bradley, yeah?
yes,
Excellent. Okay, okay, Miss Bradley, I'll go back to you. In terms of any other things, ideas, thoughts on this project you wanted to walk through?
yeah, just one more, and that was, and I was just reading through this afternoon, the conditions again, Alex, and some conversations you and I had was that we would do the conditions in a way that roundabout had to be constructed prior to certificate of occupancy of the first building constructed.
Which roundabout are we talking about? Just to be clear, I know there are at least
Kingswood-
two
the
right
Kingswood
now.
Tyee. Yeah, the
New
Kingswood
one, the
Tyee.
brand new one. Okay.
And I just wanted to confirm, because we had, we're going to go through and build the binding site plan, record final binding site plan. And our first trip won't go through that intersection until the first lot is actually built. And so we were hoping to defer, because we're just now designing that roundabout, and what I don't want to do is delay construction through this summer into next summer just for the roundabout only, when we could have the final binding site plan recorded this year and then, be in construction on the sites while we're constructing the roundabout.
And before we go to Ms. Brugh, I guess if I understand right, so that I don't mess it up in the future, the thought is, binding site plan is sort of very similar to a preliminary plat. It's just, a little bit, often used for commercial properties like this. And it's sort of the meta, the infrastructure, as opposed to, getting tenants in place right away. That's going to take a while. And the thought is, rather than that intersection needing to be built, that new intersection at Tyee that you've agreed to do, having to be built before any kind of development permit is approved for the binding site plan, you would prefer what, prior to occupancy being issued, you have to have it done, meaning that once actual tenants are ready to occupy, once that commercial, you got to ensure that thing is in there and done and ready, and that roundabout works before the big giant scissors open the new commercial center. Is that the basic concept, Mr. Bradley?
That's correct, because right now we've prepared the construction drawings for the binding site plan at risk, and we have already gone through one review with the city, and should be submitting for our second review shortly. And the roundabout is just starting its design, and so I don't want to delay the binding site plan based on this offsite roundabout.
But you agree it's appropriate to ensure that the roundabout works before a tenant, like before anyone using the property in a, for its intended purpose.
Absolutely.
But clearly there's a difference between, permits to start the infrastructure development versus permits related to actually operating businesses. And what is the condition or conditions immediately you saw that might require alterations?
There's not one currently that I'm seeing in the 52, or sorry, more than 52 conditions listed. Or no, it is 52. Unless I'm missing something, Alex. All I'm referring back to is the SEPA condition, that the SEPA conditions states at site development grading. And so I'm like, that could be site development grading of the lots. It could be the binding site plan. So I want to clarify when that is.
Okay, and I myself can't clarify the SEPA conditions. What we could potentially do is have an added condition that says the parties acknowledge the intent of the mitigation requirement under SEPA was in fact blah, blah, blah. And as a condition of this BSP, approval, this needs to happen before this. That would be, I think, probably a workaround on SEPA, and it would take care of the problem. Does that make sense?
Exactly what I'm looking for.
Okay, Mr. Brugh, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think the SEPA is written fine as far as when we need the design approved by. And I think that covers the requirement as far as the details related to the design being completed prior to the frontage improvements, and making sure that we've got the idea of how that roundabout is going to work. I do agree that we can add a condition to clarify when the roundabout needs to be constructed prior to, as that makes complete sense from a coordination standpoint, and just making sure that we've got all of the elements in place prior to the initial tenant being there.
Well, you guys are already gonna be working in the next few days on what I was gonna call Exhibit 29. You can just add this in, and so
Exactly.
Exhibit 29 will be a joint document between, the city and the applicant on, sort of new conditions or altered conditions of, I think that'd be great. And that'll, I think, between these two things, that'll hopefully clarify all of those issues. And, they're also interrelated. The thing we won't go back to, because I don't want to over confuse myself. I think I now understand the mitigation thing, but now this is the timing thing. I think I'll let you kind of send something along and then I'll incorporate it in what I produce. But I think you're already planning on working on it. Just add this to your guys's thing you work on in the next few days, and we'll make that Exhibit 29.
Sounds good.
Sure. So I'm gonna call it the joint document between city and applicant addressing proposed conditions or something to that effect. That'll be what that new document is, okay? And 28 was Mr. Brooks' email. Suppose we could lump that in, but let's not overcomplicate even more. Okay, with that, Mr. Bradley, anything further just you wanted to touch on, go through, talk about?
No further comments.
About the proposal? Okay, and I know you do have others here. Did you intend on having me hear from them? I think I have a pretty good grasp of things. I am happy to hear from them, but
Currently, they were not planning on speaking. I spoke to them before this, unless anything has changed. Speak
okay.
now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah, no, the things are so thorough and staff reports are so thorough in Tumwater that I have fewer questions than often occurs in other jurisdictions. So, but I do thank Ryan Haddock and Trevor Colby for being available just in case. With that, I'll go back to Mr. Baruch just to see. Well, I don't believe we have any members of the public from what I've been able to tell.
That's correct. I believe we have a member of the press sitting in.
And who has that job? Sorry. Really exciting, I suppose. But not a member of the public. With that, and then Ms. Baruch, I think we're on track in terms of kind of next steps, being that we will make, we'll convert your email to a PDF and we'll just make that Exhibit 28. And that was an email that you had sent to my team on June 27, 2023. And that that'll be Exhibit 28, I think I said. And then Exhibit 29 will be sort of a joint production between probably Mr. Bradley and yourself. There may be others involved at some point, but that'll be the final exhibit, and that'll just essentially be, capturing and ensuring that, the nuance and subtlety about it related to the roundabout being constructed in terms of mitigation costs, potential offsets, as it were, and timing have been captured so that, A, no problems are created, but B, also that there's, discretion, and it's very well captured for the city and the applicant to kind of move forward without having to get the hearing examiner involved or delay things, or et cetera, et cetera. Does that track and make sense?
Absolutely.
Excellent. A couple other just quick ones for me. I just always like to ask, no major changes to the comprehensive plan or zoning code that would impact this proposal in terms of vesting?
No.
And, if the comp plan had changed, we wouldn't even need the variance, but we already talked about that. So we'll move on from there. Any other ideas, thoughts you wanted to share with me? I will work, by the way, with staff to ensure that whatever weird issue I had on blank pages, I might just try to download it later, when fewer people are live streaming, TikTok or whatever, maybe it'll be quicker in the middle of the night. I don't know what happened, but other than that, I think and tonight has been extremely helpful. I think I fully grasped kind of the nuances, and there were quite a few, but I'm glad that we were able to accomplish that. I don't have any other questions, I believe. So unless you had any further clarification you wanted to provide or other members of staff you intended on calling on, I think we can sort of conclude the hearing and then we just need to figure out timing in terms of when stuff will come back my way. But do you have further, before we go to timing, did you have further, clarification, thoughts, ideas you want to talk about, Ms. Baruch?
No, nothing major. I just wanted to mention that we did pass along new exhibit 28 to the applicant after I sent it to you. So they are fully aware of the addition of that language. So that's all.
Okay, so Ms. Bradley, if it's okay with you, I just will convert that into a PDF for my own sake. Ultimately, it is the city that maintains the official record, but you saw what the email said. It wasn't anything complicated. It was adding a sentence. So are we good on that? You can even just thumbs up if we are. I have a thumbs up acknowledgement from the applicant rep. Okay, back to Ms. Baruch. Anything further other than I just wanted to say when thought wise in terms of you guys putting together that final piece of the puzzle, which will be exhibit 29.
Yeah, I think we could probably work together tomorrow at the latest Friday to figure out those two conditions as long as Tyrell, we already have a meeting tomorrow morning for a different project. So I'm sure we can work out some additional time.
Okay, why don't we just say, give you guys till, end of the day Friday. I am behind on some things. I was sick and then, there's a lot going on in my world. I'm getting caught up and I got one thing being sent to the city tomorrow, hopefully a second thing shortly thereafter. And I certainly know how important, timelines are for development, but I don't intend on this taking tons and tons of extra time, but if you can settle on 29 when you get it, I will make every effort to, and we have the holiday next week, but I'll make every effort to then produce a decision within a couple weeks of the record closing at that point. Does that track and make sense, Ms. Baruch?
Absolutely.
Okay, Ms. Bradley, anything final from you there? No, okay. Well, I think with that, we can end our meeting tonight and I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, and have a great evening. I think the sun might even still be out, so go enjoy it.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you very much.